GoCognitive recently had the opportunity to interview Alym Amlani, a practicing magician, during our visit to Vancouver, British Columbia. In this interview, Alym discusses some fascinating connections between magic and psychology. At the University of British Columbia, Alym studied psychology and especially focused on the role of attention in cognitive processing. Alym is going to show us a couple basic tricks to illustrate his main points. Keep in mind that these tricks are within the public domain so that Alym will not violate his obligations as a magician. Before we proceed to the interview, let's take a look at one of these tricks.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Pretty good, how are you?
Nice to meet you. My name is Alym. I'll be your magician for the day.
Mike.
Do you guys want to see something absolutely amazing or just kind of cool?
Absolutely amazing.
Good answer. What I have over here is a deck of cards, okay? Now, in just a moment, I'm going to have you choose one of these cards. If you don't mind, maybe you can help me out for just a moment?
Sure.
Could you go ahead and just touch one of them? Are you happy with that one there?
Yep.
Okay, can you take it and show it to the camera?
Okay.
I won't look. You done?
Yep.
Could you go ahead and put that back anywhere you'd like in the deck?
Okay.
Now here's something really weird. Do you believe in hypnotism?
Yes.
Because something strange has now happened. Your card has left the deck. It flies up invisibly through the air. Now I haven't moved at all. What was your card?
The Jack of Hearts.
The Jack of Hearts. I'd like you to take a look in your pocket. The Jack of Hearts.
Well, thank you for taking the time to speak with us.
Thank you for having me.
And I'd like to open up with sort of a general question. It seems as if magicians might very well be the oldest students of psychology. So I was hoping you could talk about the different ways that magicians might use certain concepts and elements of psychology to mislead people.
I think one of the coolest things about magic is that it's developed over several years. And one of the ways that obviously has evolved over this time to mislead people is misdirection. And misdirection is kind of a blanket term used to describe anything where magicians are going to take your attention away from the method of the trick. Now, a really common example is your common thief or your common pickpocket. And you'll see magicians do this on stage for fun. Of course, they give the goods back when they're done. But the thing is that people can get so wrapped up in the trick that's happening in front of them that they lose the ability to pay attention to things that are not happening or that are happening that are outside of their attention. Another common example of this is when you're driving. Have you ever noticed that when you're driving your car, you'll be driving for a little while and you'll take your attention away from the road when the phone rings, for example?
Yeah.
One of the most common accidents that you're going to see on the road is called driver looked but failed to see. And in that case, the person is looking right out the window. And they've got a perfect view of what's right in front of them. But if their attention is elsewhere, the fact that they've been distracted for that quick second causes them to have this perceptual blindness. And what magicians are able to do is they can cause that to happen. And the way they'll do that, for example, is by shifting their eye gaze. So when I'm talking to you right now, if I was looking at my hands the whole time, and I was staring at my hands and talking to my hands, the second I look up at you, your natural response is to look up at me. The second our eyes make contact, I know your eyes are not looking at where my hands are. And at that point, I can do whatever I need to do.
All right, so what do magicians know about cognition, and how do they use different mechanisms within the brain to take advantage of certain things and misdirect people and create these illusions?
Magicians have a very deep understanding of cognition, but they probably wouldn't talk about it in the same way psychologists do. Now, in the paper we wrote over the summer, one of the things that we argue is that psychologists can learn a lot from what magicians already do, and similarly, magicians can learn a lot from what psychologists already do. If you look at the way that magic is studied, a magician will learn a trick, will try it out for an audience, and they'll stick with what works, and they'll move away from what doesn't. Much like in psychology, the way research works is that you'll develop an experiment, you'll form a hypothesis, and you'll test it out. Now, more specifically, you were asking about the understanding of cognition among magicians. And magicians they pay a lot of attention to the way the mind works. And they use some very simple principles, such as expectation, to take advantage of their viewer. Now, in an example, you remember when we did the trick where I had you choose a card and you found that Jack of Hearts in your pocket?
Yeah.
Now, I'm not going to say how that was done, But if you could imagine, what led you to pick that Jack of Hearts?
I believe I had a free choice. You let me choose any card in the deck.
And here's the goal of expectation. When you see someone holding a deck of cards, I didn't show you all their faces. In fact, I only showed you maybe 4 or 5 of the cards, and if you go back to the clip, you'll actually see that you only saw the bottom few cards of the deck. Now what if, I'm not saying that this is the case, but what if that deck of cards, what if every other card in that deck was the Jack of Hearts? It doesn't explain how it got into your pocket, but it would certainly explain how I got you to choose that Jack of Hearts. So a really simple example of how magicians are able to manipulate your cognitive processes is it's taking advantage of common assumptions that you're going to make. So you feel like your choice was fair, but when in fact it was actually restricted to maybe one card.
One of the concepts you talk about in your article is this idea of object permanence, so I was hoping you could speak on that for a little while and maybe give an example.
Sure. I mean, we all know object permanence is the idea that an object, when taken out of view, still persists in the brain. So the brain assumes that it is still there even though you're not looking at it anymore. Now, I want you to see the hand is completely empty over here. If I just kind of wave my hand over the other, you can make a coin come out of nowhere. That's not object permanence, that's magic. Now, an example of object permanence, however, is where you take the coin over here, okay? Now, I want you to watch the coin. If I take it over here and I squeeze it very tightly in my hand, you're actually going to see the coin disappear. It jumps invisibly through the air and lands back in the other hand. Now, magicians have long known that you can take a coin from one hand, pretend to put it in the other, and the brain will assume and fill in the blanks that the coin left one hand and transferred to the other hand. They wouldn't call it object permanence, they would call it a false transfer. Now, I'm not going to explain how that works, but the argument in the paper is that knowing why that works can teach psychologists a lot about a simple theory like object permanence. Why is it that your brain is so easily fooled into believing that the coin leaves one hand, travels to the other hand? And why is it that then when you see this hand empty, it almost feels like the coin disappeared?
You also talk about visual illusions, so could you just sort of go over just a general overview of what they consist of?
Sure. I mean, the trick talked about in the paper was one by Dr. Gustav Kuhn out of Durham, UK. And he was talking about the vanishing ball illusion. And in that illusion, the magician takes the ball and throws it up in the air a couple of times. And on the last time, instead of throwing it in the air, holds onto it with his hand. Now, the audience perceives the ball as disappearing mid-flight as opposed to being held in the hand. And one of the reasons that works, I think, is because the brain needs to make assumptions about what's going to happen in front of it. And you need to do this to stay and to function in the world. Because if you think about how much information enters your eyes every second, and how your brain has to deal with all that information, it could teach us a lot about how to develop better computer systems that could process visual information as well. Think about what happens when you're looking at the world. Let's say you're driving your car at 100 kilometers an hour. Every second you're getting a whole lot of information entering your eyes. It's got to be processed through your retina, it's got to go into the brain, it's got to be turned into a signal. Your brain's got to bring certain information into consciousness while ignoring other information, right?
Yeah.
Now, how long does that take to happen?
Not long at all.
It feels like it's real time, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And yet, the grand illusion of perception is you're only consciously aware of what you're paying attention to. Everything else disappears. And one of the really cool things that one of the studies has shown in the past is that your brain actually has to predict what's happening in front of you. It's got to actually complete things in front of you. And like with the vanishing ball illusion, if that means assuming that the ball is going to move in the air and creating the percept in your brain of that ball already moving, it should do that, because normally the ball isn't held onto by the hand. Normally the ball would continue on into the air and disappear, and fly up and down, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
So when that doesn't happen, you're violating an assumption of the brain, and that's what creates the really cool illusion of the ball disappearing mid-flight. And if you think about it, your brain has evolved over time to survive in the world. It hasn't evolved to figure out magic tricks. And I think that's a really cool example of how magicians are able to mislead you. You asked that question right at the beginning. We're going to bring this full circle. How magicians are able to mislead the brain and take advantage of the way the brain is developed to create these really cool perceptual effects. And all it's really doing, and all magicians are really doing, is having an understanding of how the brain works, doing something that takes advantage of the assumption the brain's going to make, and then violating that assumption for the person. And if you look at most magic tricks, they actually fall into that category. You assume the coin is moving from one hand to the other, but it doesn't. The coin stays in the same hand, and just because your brain and your eyes tell you that that coin has moved from one hand to the other, you're led to believe that that is the case. And when it's shown to be not the case, the only logical assumption is that the coin disappeared.
Well, thank you very much, Alym, for taking the time to speak with us. I learned a lot. I think our viewers are really going to like this clip and the different tricks you showed, and I think it'll teach us a lot about psychology.
I sure hope so. And if you ever want your wallet back, you can come see me after the take.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey guys, nice to meet you. My name is Alym. I'll be your magician for the day. You are Mike and Jay. I want you to see that all of these cards are all different, okay?
Okay.
Now, Mike, we're going to start with you if that's okay. I want you to just go ahead and choose one of these cards. Show it to the camera if you don't mind. Perfect. And if you could just leave that card back in the deck. Now, are you happy with that card?
Yeah.
Okay, because what we're going to do is I'm going to square up the cards just like this, and I'd like you to wave your hand over top of the deck. And just like that, one card jumps right back to the top. Mike, was that your card?
Yep.
Now, the weird thing about that is you can actually take that card right over here, right? You can take it, you can leave it somewhere near the bottom. Even if I square this up just like that, you will watch it jump right back to the top a second time. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Now, no surprise. All right, that's fine. Maybe Grandpa does this at birthday parties. Now, what we're going to do is I'm actually going to show you that the card really does go right over here. Now, can you see the card here?
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. What I'm going to do is I'll leave this sticking out like that. And Mike, could you go ahead and push that all the way in?